Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Fraud Michael Skiba. First off, welcome to 2021. This is our first episode of DFTV, episode 13. And also, happy St. Patrick's Day to those that are celebrating out there for that. So I am so excited to have you here for this episode and really excited to kick off this year with a great topic and a fantastic co-host today. So I'd like to first off welcome Jasmine Garcia-Vieux. Jasmine, thank you so much for being here this morning. I appreciate you spending some time with us today and your expertise in this area.
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning.
Fantastic. Yeah, so we are going to dive into, this is such an interesting case. We'll go over some of the quick facts first, but just a quick introduction on Jasmine. So Jasmine has over 15 years of experience working in fraud and fraud investigations. She's an attorney for Smith & Brink. And she is also the founder and CEO of Scoop Analytics, which is a very innovative kind of tech company that focuses on fighting fraud. And she has, as part of that platform, something called the Virtual Investigator. So it's very cool stuff. Definitely encourage you to check that out to all you fraud fighters out there. So, with this platform, just like to say, first off, last year was an exciting year for us. We had 12 episodes and we kind of explored around the world, of course, virtually. So definitely excited this year to kick it off now. And we've got a lot of episodes we're already planning into the summer. So please keep sending those ideas in. And if you'd like to be a guest as well, please feel free to reach out to me in addition, and we'll definitely get you slated in. So, but definitely fantastic. So Jasmine, today we're going to talk about this case. So interesting, so many areas to talk about. And I think, one of the things that we know, we've been in this industry for such a long time that, well, not that long of a time, but a significant period of time. And, we know that the MOs to these frauds don't change. And that's, I think, the surprising thing for me, and you and I talked about this a little bit, is how, the frauds, we see the same kind of DNA fingerprint, back years and years ago. And we're seeing these same things happen today. And I think that's the first thing that jumped out at me, about this case was, this could have been just last year with some of the things that, some of the key elements here. So let me just go over some of the quick facts and then we can, really dive in. So this company, really interesting. So this is the McKesson Corporation. So they're headquartered on the West Coast. So we're kind of taking a cross-country trip here out of a little bit cold New York. And so they're based out of San Francisco. This is a very, very large healthcare company, right? So they have, I think their revenue last couple of years has been over $200 billion. So huge company, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing. They're right in that healthcare space. Well, this fraud started, 1938 was when the company was first incepted. And here's where it gets interesting is when we started to look at the history. So the mastermind behind this was a gentleman by the name of Philip Muzica. Now that was his real name, but he apparently had a fraud history. So as of 1919, right before he kind of engaged with this company, he already had 2 convictions for fraud. So he was involved in some bootlegging activities and also some bribery for customs officials. So it was very interesting. We can see already that the kind of internal motivation was already there with him, and we're gonna dive in. What was really interesting is, after those convictions, he changed his name. So he decided to then go by a F. Donald Coster, and he gave himself a couple nice designations, an MD and a PhD. Of course, gave him some credibility. And he went and he purchased this company, and the company originally was called McKesson and Robbins. And they delved a little bit into the pharmaceutical world, but he because of his kind of persuasive tactics, he built up kind of their distribution to meet the competitors, Walgreens and things like this. So what he did was once he built that model up, he decided that's when the fraud was going to ensue. So he kind of elicited his 3 brothers. It was kind of interesting when, we look at exactly how he did this. So what he did was he started a separate company, W.W. Smith, which I guess his brother was the CEO of. And this company, I guess when they actually issued the warrants was only, it was a shell with typewriters. When they would issue the invoices, what they would do is issue fake invoices to this McKesson Corporation, looking for, goods and services, if you will. And then McKesson would invoice these back, pay these accordingly. Now, the other brother was kind of in charge of moving the bank, the money around from the bank accounts to kind of avoid detection. So he had the whole group in on this. And this ensued for quite a period of time. What they would do is they would skim, I think they said 75 cents commission for every invoice that they kind of transacted. So, they were skimming a lot of money off the top here. And the whole thing was discovered when their legitimate treasurer noticed she kind of questioned some of the things about the WW Corporation. She went to Bradstreet and apparently questioned them, did some research, and found that this WW company really didn't exist. So it wasn't really a quote unquote company. And that's when the whole kind of thing started to unfold. And we had actually some good results after that, as far as developing some auditing and protocols and things like this. But I mean, Jasmine, I don't even know where to start. There's so many cool things about this case that again, we just see on a daily basis. So let's just start really early on. This guy, this Philip Muzica. So he started off before even this situation. It seemed like his frauds and these are the only two that we had on record was the ones that he was convicted of. But we see that they kind of escalated slowly, and to the point where he would keep looking for more until eventually he had all his brothers enlisted. So in the frauds that you've seen, do you see this to be the case? That escalation from an internal standpoint?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would say, first off, I feel like you just recited notes from a recent case of mine. It's interesting that here we are almost 80 years or more later, and there's so many similar characteristics in the schemes that we see, from the 1930s, and here we are in 2021. But yes, definitely to answer your question, they do escalate. This is something that happens over time. They start small. A lot of these opportunistic fraudsters, they want to see how far they can get. And once they see that the schemes are working, it usually develops into something more expansive. It's definitely something we see, even today.
Yeah, and what's interesting, so I mean, being an attorney, of course, you see this. Do you? And we don't know, being dated so long ago, I don't know what the convictions were. I don't know how he was punished. I mean, do you see that when there is that lack of punishment, if he was punished very severely with those first two, do you think that would have maybe deterred him coming down the road? Do you see this in some of the cases you've had?
Oh, absolutely. Fortunately, in the type of cases that we, investigate and then litigate, there are some parallel criminal, convictions, but unfortunately, the punishment is not very drastic. So because of that, there is a lack of deterrence. And, the fraudsters, if they walk away with a slap on the wrist, it's inevitable that they'll go back to doing exactly what they were doing, before. So unfortunately, we don't see too much strong punishment in this area. And because of that, there is a lack of deterrence. Yeah.
And we wonder too, with somebody like this, the career criminal, if you will, and I'm sure, this is what I find interesting too, is, looking back at all the fraudsters I've interviewed in the space I operate in, you find that these little, misrepresentations, quote unquote, were evident even younger, even when they were, younger kids and whatnot, where they, were just lying per se, lying to your mom or dad about something you did or didn't do. I mean, it kind of slowly ensues from there. And we see a difference in, in the internal kind of makeup where, people, some of them, with the way that they're kind of designed, if you will, their chemistry, they actually get a feeling of that, like a feeling of reward. It's kind of like, and they enjoy that, and then they simply continue on. So, there's the greed factor, of course. So that's a whole different, story. But I find you have like a push and a pull, almost the internal push, but then, that external, money, the carrot kind of hanging over them.
Yeah, definitely. Now you're to the mind of the fraudster, right? And when they see an easy win, you know, how can they not pursue it further, right? And a lot of the times their ego plays a big part of this, where they're constantly striving to outdo themselves, but also to outdo some of their competitors in the market. So there's this constant push to be better. And, you know, in the cases that I've seen, a lot of the fraudsters that, you know, I've actually had in the chair and deposed, they believe they're not doing anything wrong, you know, especially when, you know, the victim here, and a lot of the cases that I see, is the insurance company. You know, they don't think that they're doing anything wrong. They're not hurting the public. And they believe, you know, that they're businessmen and women and they're living the dream, and, you know, they're not violating any laws. And unfortunately, you know, they're driven by their own egos and that power trip, and the fraud continues.
And it's funny you mention that, because I remember seeing a note here that he actually, I think he might have nominated himself for president. Did you see this too? Yeah. So I mean, let's talk about ego. You know, he kind of self-nominated himself, and then I think he kind of gained a little ground with it, and then he was on to other endeavors. But you know, again, to that point, you know, I think, you know, that was evident very early on with him. And then, you know, to add the name, the designations behind it. I mean, the whole, you know, it seemed like the typical MO that was there. But yeah, very, very interesting. I think, you know, when we talk about, you know, the corporate kind of how he purchased the corporation. So, I mean, that was kind of disturbing to me, because, I mean, here he did have that criminal history, changed his name, was then able to purchase a business. This was a legitimate business. I think it was maybe 100 years old at that point in time, and they had a you know, well-established following, well-established culture. You know, and he was able to purchase this company. You know, and then he took it to a different level. But I mean, even just the fact that could happen, you know, kind of surprised me. You know, surprised me as well.
Yeah, you know, we do that a lot. So not much has changed apparently in 80 years, because we see a lot of the fraudsters that we're looking at, you know, they operate off of different aliases, right? You know, their name might be John Michael Smith, and they work under Michael Smith or Jay Smith. And so we see different variations of names being used, but also I'd say I'm seeing more and more, in order to avoid detection, they're creating these sham entities, or sometimes even some of the legitimate pieces of the business. We'll see them in their family members' names. So they have grandma and grandpa and their aunts and uncles, and even their children's names that they're using to incorporate some of these entities to avoid detection. So not much has changed, Mike, I'd say, in the last 80 years, because we're still seeing that today.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, are there, you know, are you finding any increase, you know, making it, you know, easier from an investigative standpoint to actually try to research, you know, these, you know, just as you mentioned, you know, we have a doctor, a businessman, something like this, that does go through the process, changes his name, let's say, even if he does this legally, but then, you know, operates under a family member. I mean, how can you, from an investigative standpoint, what have you found is, you know, to be the most successful way to actually determine, you know, that this Philip Buzica, excuse me, is behind it?
You know, I'm learning more and more now that technology is key. And, you know, what we have working for us is that it's not 1938, and there have been a lot of advances in technology. And, you know, we need to leverage the data that is available. While, you know, these schemes have definitely become more sophisticated through the years, with that level of sophistication comes one point that these fraudsters forget, is that they're leaving a digital footprint. Right. So, you know, it's important for us to leverage that data and to tap into that, so we can use that as part of our investigations and use that as a tool, using technology as a tool when we're combating insurance fraud.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because I see, you know, one of the big flags that we know of when we get into actual internal theft is those individuals that try to or that continue to use some form of paper medium, because paper medium is harder to track. It's harder, you know, when you're dealing with paper checks. You know, it's actually hard to determine timestamps and who that actually was, you know, transferred to. Where, you know, we have a digital fingerprint. You know, we can follow that all the way through IP addresses and transaction numbers and things like this, so we can actually determine that from an investigative standpoint. So right here during the 1930s, they were, of course, at a disadvantage. They couldn't utilize those things, but but still, I still think that is a big flag for anyone that's operating in this area, is that the hard paper trail is definitely something that should be looked at. But yeah, and I fully agree. I think the database is, and this is obviously the world, with Scoop Analytics. This is what you do there. Kind of managing that, and I think that it's so important to look at those third-party databases as well, how to link those into the system, because it's not. I think a lot of times too, when we do the investigations, I think the first thing, like when I get asked that question, people automatically think of like kind of the social media aspect of it. Yeah. Social media searching. Oh, what can you find on Facebook? And that's extremely important. You and I know that, and that's a whole different conversation. Is what you can and cannot use from social media. But I think at that deeper hardcore level, we're talking about those databases that actually maintain. That's their function. A company maintains a database that keeps track of. Whatever that might be. It could be prior convictions. It could be, it could be frequency of claims or something like that. And I think that's what's important from an investigative standpoint, to link those third-party databases in.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. With insurance companies, we're asking our investigators who are on the front line to make decisions at a moment's notice. But sometimes we're not, unfortunately, giving them the tools that they need to make informed decisions. So that's why, technology and the databases that you're referring to and the work that we do, at Scoop Analytics is so important, because you need to make an informed decision, especially when you're dealing with statutory requirements in different jurisdictions that require you to make a decision, within such a short amount of time. It's like, how can we do that if we don't have the tools we need to get the information on a specific target, similar to what we see here in this case. If you were to run, in 1938, you couldn't run him through the system to see what do we know about this guy, but now in 2021, we have those capabilities, and, with the development of various tools, we can make those decisions fairly quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, that multi-pronged approach, that's one thing, always recommend, is because you need the human component, and you also need the data component. You need the people that know what to look for within those systems, and I think that's something that I think we see as a pain point, is a lot of companies might just focus on the data thinking it's a plug and play, but you still need someone to set the, I mean, even in the most advanced machine learning AI systems right now, you still need someone to tell that system what to look for, what to do. It's not gonna know what to look for in whatever book of business or whatever threats that you have. I think that's the key,
Absolutely. I mean, I usually take sort of this two-pronged approach, right? I'm looking at teams and I'm looking at technology, right? We have to build really strong teams in order to use that technology and use it well, right? You want to develop teams that are diverse. I want to see a group of SIU investigators or teams that have different perspectives, right? Because we have to be thinking outside of the box here. Fraud is not static. It's constantly evolving, and we need to change and evolve and pivot at various points of the life cycle of an investigation. So definitely my focus in the past couple of years has been on teams and technology.
Yep. And I think when we look at we've always kind of bucketed the fraudsters two areas, right? The opportunistic fraudster, and then those that kind of just like this, like Philip, the ones that are highly contrived, malicious, set out. This is their career. This is what they do, And I think having an idea on how to focus on those different types of fraudsters is key. Reducing the opportunities that come up. I mean, this case is different because this is like those big scale cases that we've seen, those big medical providers where there's just lots of links and lots of different operators, within the platform. But one thing I always find, it's interesting because I've been doing a lot of work lately on kind of the power of persuasion and how that kind of always comes into play. And I always find that it's fascinating because when I look at, these big fraud cases, and I look at somebody like this, I think, how many people did he persuade? How I'm sure he had those, those top five, kind of skills, if you will, to kind of bring his brothers in and whatnot. And it's very common. If you look at, the scams dating back to even the medieval days, they involved a charismatic figure, someone that had certain, certain personality traits, and I find that, in some of the cases, I know, again, getting back to the ego thing, I think it's so important because we see that it becomes almost a, personal challenge, if you will, within that particular person we might be, investigating. But there always seems to be like one core person leading the charge in a lot of those bigger cases, I find.
Oh, definitely. And what's interesting is that in a lot of the cases that I see, some of the fraudsters, they have their legitimate businesses, right? The monies that they usually gain from some of the illegitimate work is usually pushed to fund some of the legitimate practices. So in their mind, they're just legitimate businessmen and women, making money. So it's always interesting to see that, some of these folks, they have sort of a dual role, right? Continuing to facilitate the fraud that at some point will ultimately fund some of the legitimate businesses that they own. But yeah, I agree 100%. It's an interesting type of person that is usually at the head of the table. And we see that a lot in the types of cases that we, investigate on a regular basis.
And, we even see this, and my memory is just thinking back to some of the bigger cases that I've had, and I'm just thinking of, actually sitting across from these people in those examinations, and you have too, and you're just thinking to yourself, wow, the nerve of this person, the things that they're saying and not saying, or just simply not showing up, for things. I mean, it's just, it's very surprising sometimes. I mean, it's my surprise slowly diminished throughout my career, but still, just the fact of the lack of, I guess, respect for either other authority within those individuals. I just find that fascinating, that internal kind of structure that seems to be present in a lot of their traits.
Yeah, I definitely have sat across from many individuals. I can think I had a provider UO just last week, and the provider started asking me questions as if I was the witness. I said, wait a minute, no, let's remember why we're here. I'm asking the questions here. So yeah, they do have sort of this ego, and they get very defensive when you put them on the spot and you have evidence to support, the allegations that something funny is going on here. And that's when you see a shift in their personality, and they get very defensive. So that's always interesting to watch.
Right. Makes for a good afternoon, I'm sure, right?
Entertaining, at least.
So, here's what's interesting too. I think one of the good things about this case was it really changed the whole auditing approach, auditing procedures. There was some regulations, rules passed after this, kind of put this on, put that whole internal kind of fraud, financial statement exaggeration, skimming kind of on the radar. And I think that was one of the good results from this, is that, it really changed. I think in 1939, the Institute of Accountants actually made some formal changes based on this. So I think it was good. And I think one of the most beneficial things about it was they kind of implemented a strategy where, external auditors would come in, instead of having internal audits, which of course, you could hire someone to be completely biased, towards whatever cover up that you're trying to get over on. But I think that's what's really important for here is, in this case, is that it actually kind of implemented a strategy where, you had those external unbiased, sources that had to perform the audit and had to present that to the boards. And I think that's what's really interesting, because we see that a lot too, is when you have that external, objective lens. I think is so important to approach and looking at fraud from that broad, ecosystem, because we know it could be absolutely anywhere. It could be in the beginning stages, the end stages of, we're talking insurance, but it could be any, any business, any type of company.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. I think, oversight is key, right? We have to be in a position to identify vulnerabilities within the company, right, in order to identify instances of fraud. And like you said, having a diverse perspective, right? Bringing in outside independent consultants to come in and identify those vulnerabilities is important. So yeah, what they implemented after this scheme was, it was definitely important, because I can't imagine now in 2021, had that not happened, the billions of dollars that would have been lost because of the lack of oversight. So it's definitely important.
Yep. Yeah, Jasmine, we had a couple questions come in too. So what do you see as the landscape, the future? We talked about prosecution early on. So the question focuses on kind of the future landscape, the trends that, that we're seeing with prosecutions. And I can take a crack at it, and then I'll turn it over to you, because we just finished a study actually at Colorado. We worked with the Coalition Against Insurance Fraud on this one, and what we found, we looked at prosecutions dating back, I think almost 15 years, and we found we just found a lot of discrepancies basically within the states, within the jurisdictions, and really, I guess the whole theme after our study was inconsistency. That was the whole theme. We didn't unfortunately have any patterns that we could identify. It seemed to be, the prosecutions seemed to be focused a lot on even environmental factors. Even on the political landscape of the time and of that area per se, whether a case would be pursued or not. So we, going forward, hopefully we can start to, develop a more consistent approach across states and jurisdictions. But what are you seeing, obviously, from a practicing attorney, from your side on this?
Well, I know, to that point, Mike, I just say, what I'd like to see is more collaboration. I think there's a lack of that now, and that's why we're not seeing the number of prosecutions that we would hope in this industry, because we see what's happening on a regular basis. And although we can pursue these cases from a civil perspective, we'd like to see more involvement, from the state and more prosecutions, criminal prosecutions. So I'd like to see more collaboration. I think we're sort of moving in that direction, and I hope we continue that. But I think communication is key. And I'd like to see more collaboration between insurance companies and the prosecutor's office, so that we can see some changes in this area. Because like we said earlier, if there's nothing deterring these opportunistic fraudsters from doing what they are currently doing, they will continue to do it. And then we won't see many changes. So that's what I'd like to see.
Absolutely. And I think too, one of the gaps that we saw was the fact that there really is not any central repository, central database to maintain, to keep track of prosecutions, and even help prosecutors, defense attorneys with just developing case law, if you will, knowing what areas are doing what, and what the good results are and what the negative results were. So I mean, other than an industry group like the Coalition, who does it more just to help members, there's really no official reporting requirement that we saw from a overall landscape, countrywide, that we could pull from. So I mean, this is one of the gaps we saw, in research for sure.
I think one of the problems too is that, as I said earlier, it's constantly evolving. So once we're able to sort of capture and get a better understanding of what the fraud is today, tomorrow it will be something different. So constantly, educating ourselves on developments within the industry is also important, because, I can't tell you the number of cases that I've seen over the last few years. Not one of them has been the same. We're dealing with different variations of fraud. So, just staying on top of the trends and educating ourselves on the different, types of fraud that we're seeing is also important.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jasmine, we have a bunch more questions, but I know we're only a minute out. So I always like to end. We could talk about this forever. I know it's such a great topic. And I think, it's just, again, the whole lesson for us when we first started looking at this case was just, the fraudsters, they just changed the MO. The fingerprint's the same, the cases are different, the front and the back of it's different, but really the core of these core elements that we see on a daily basis is not going to change. 100 years from now, they're going to be having another podcast talking about the same thing, so they probably going to have podcasts at that point. So, but Jasmine, I always like to end a little bit too with kind of a direct question towards you. Like, what is two things? One is the most interesting case you've had, and a fun fact about Jasmine.
All right. So Interesting case. I don't know off the top of my head that I can think of the most interesting. They're all unique in their own way. And like I said before, it's constantly changing. So I love the fact that I'm working on different cases every day. They're all crazy in their own right. An interesting fact about Jasmine. Well, this is just between us, right? This isn't live or anything. Right?
No, of course. Absolutely.
Very interesting fact. I do like to binge watch on reality TV, Mike. I admit it. I love reality TV. It takes me out of the world the crazy world that we're in. So interesting fact about Jasmine is she loves reality TV. Whenever I can fit it in.
You know, my next question is going to be, you have to tell me what's the top choice. Is it the Housewives or is it?
I'm definitely a Housewives watcher.
Okay. Okay.
All about the Housewives. I love a little crazy.
And reality is pure real. So, I mean, it's just right, brings you right back to.
But that'll be our little secret, right?
Absolutely right. Won't go anywhere. But Jasmine, listen, thank you so much. And to everyone that chimed in, thank you as well. We will get to your follow-up questions after, of course. Jasmine, contact info to anyone that would like to follow up and reach you about Scoop Analytics. Again, you're doing great things there and love to hear more about that too. So how can they reach you there?
Well, you can reach me here on LinkedIn. You could also visit the website at scoopanalytics.com. Fantastic.
Fantastic. And so this is Dr. Fraud. Until next time. So look for the next episode. We'll start to post that probably in 2 weeks. And we'll send out a date, probably mid-April or so will be the next episode. But again, keep the questions coming in. Thank you so much for the support last year. Definitely looking forward to 2021. Hopefully we'll be on the road a little bit this coming year and we don't have to sit there and watch through the little peepholes on every episode. So that's the goal. But wishing everybody a great day. Jasmine, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
And everybody have a great day. Take care.
Have a good day, everyone.